This is in response to our dinks segment where we talked about the dink influencers.
We're dinks. We're going to get asked daily when we plan on having kids.
We're dinks. Of course we're going to go out to eat every night after work.
We're dinks. We don't have to ask our family for financial help or to watch our kid when we want to go out.
We're dinks. We're going to go to Costco and buy all the snacks in bulk that we want.
We're dinks. We have disposable income to spend on whatever we would like and don't have to spend on a kid.
I'm going to put this up on the screen, but Russell, you're going to have to full screen it so you can read it because the font is too small for me.
Yeah. All right. So, I don't mind people getting mad about stuff that I did say, but a lot of people seem to have misinterpreted that segment. And I went back and watched just to make sure.
And this is a reasonable comment. This is not an angry comment.
This comment I picked because it's pretty much what I agree with this comment. So it'll help to clarify. All right. So this is Patrick Holt, 2270. It may not be conscious narcissism, but it could be structural narcissism in the same way that capitalism imposes structural greed on companies and their employees who are required to profit maximize and withhold possible generosity as a matter of routinized procedure. Consumerism ideologically or as an unconscious value set is the product of indoctrination by advertising. It's not the result of personal moral failing. It's the habit of moral failing generated by the advertising stage of the process of valorization. And yes, you're absolutely right. A lot of this is rationalization of the choice imposed by low pay and high rents to not have kids because they can't afford to, and they're denied the stability and security which would otherwise trigger the decision to try to get pregnant. Here's the soundtrack for this situation. Who's Gonna Love You When You're Old and Fat and Ugly by After the Fire. All right, so
thanks for that comment.
Thank you very much. That was a very well thought out comment. So it was very strange. A lot of times in these comments, you get people like arguing with things you didn't say or ignoring things that you did say. We said right early on that it was basically trying to put a good face on an economic situation. And yet you had a lot of people saying, people can't afford. Yes, people can't afford it. Now, like the idea of like judging people. Okay, first of all, I think this is something me and Keaton are very much alike in. I could give a fuck what anyone else does. Live your best life. Do your thing. I don't care. In terms of not like understanding that, people can be happy without kids and sometimes they're miserable with kids. Let me tell you why I made the choices that I made in life. So my grandfather was like your classic, like old school Jew, which means you get married and that's it. Your life is over. You do everything for your family. You never do anything for yourself ever again. So he just worked for the family, and yet he had wanted to be an architect. And so his whole den was full of drawings and things that he would do that were never going to go beyond that den. When I would tell him I wanted to travel, he would, because he had been doing this to himself his entire life, he would tell me, well, what do you want to do that for? And then as soon as I would do it,
my kind of guy.
What was it like? What was it like? No, he wanted to.
No, I know. I'm just kidding.
But he couldn't. He was too tied down. My grandmother was like this castrating classic, shrew. So, she would always guilt him if he wanted to go anywhere. So he never got to travel. So he had this basement full of maps and globes and, but he never really got to go anywhere. So I got to look at that. And I said, not me, brother. So I didn't live that life. And what I said in the video was, yeah, man, I mean, that wouldn't have been right for me. So I'd be the last person to say, you can't be happy not doing that. But at the same time, see, this is the crazy thing. And this is part of my perspective on it. If you asked my grandfather if he would do it differently, he would have said no. He adored his family. He loved his family. He didn't see that as something he shouldn't have done. He didn't view his life that way. He didn't talk with those kinds of regrets. So my personal experience is that people who don't have a lot of a passion, right? Something that really drives them, as I do and always have. So I'm happy without that, and I'd feel inhibited by it. Most people are just not like that, and family is what gives them that sense of meaning and purpose. certainly if you look at the video we showed of those dinks, again, and this is something we said in the video, it's not like they're talking about doing something very meaningful with their lives. They're talking about all the empty consumerism they can explore because they don't have kids. Well, so naturally, that's going to get old. I mean, nobody's that shallow. I mean, eventually you're going to get tired of that. And, being able to get as many snacks as you want is going to be small comfort for not having created any sense of purpose or meaning in your life. And I'm not saying that has to be kids, but it certainly can't be that. Certainly can't be watching the game and trips to Costco. I mean, how sad if you only live once that's what you do. But we also had some people saying, hey, how do you know? How do you know? So, all right. To be totally fair, there has been a lot of research on this subject, which I pulled a little bit of. Okay, so you have, where did it go? Okay, so I want to be totally honest. Many parents are happier than non-parents, but not in the U.S., except for Keaton. On the face of it, parenting is a very poor route to take if your final destination is happiness. Having children is an open invitation to the universe to visit misery upon you. So to get to the meat of it, and yet a new study of the life satisfaction of 22 Western countries has found that in some places, parents are happier than non-parents. A Council of Contemporary Families briefing paper based on a longer peer-reviewed report to be published in September argues that parental discontent is neither global nor inevitable. In some countries, humans with offspring actually report higher levels of well-being than those without. Quote, our results indicate that the parental happiness penalty varies substantially from country to country. In fact, some countries, such as Norway and Hungary, parents are actually happier than non-parents. That is also true on average of parents in such places as Portugal, Finland, Sweden, and Spain. At the other end of the list is a highly developed Western democracy whose citizens with children report being significantly less content than citizens without. Yes, cue the gasps. It's the U.S. Of the 22 countries the researchers studied, America has the biggest happiness differential between parents and the child free. So, hey, sure. And the article goes on to discuss, which, common sense. Yes, countries that have more vacation time and that provide daycare, people with children report being happier than people without. In the U.S., which is the freak show of the Western world and its absolute lack of support for parents, even as it goes on about its family values, yeah, sure, because you're put in such a bind as a parent, and that's why, yeah, economically. Even if I were more inclined to have kids today, would I have kids today? No, man. My hat's off to you, brother, man. That is a bold choice in with the state of these here United States. So, I don't think either one of us were slamming people without kids or saying nobody can be happy, or certainly not saying that the economics of it don't make it very difficult for people to have children.
Oh, of course, yeah.
But I think there's an element of what you're seeing in those videos, because remember, those videos are not dropping in a vacuum. They're dropping in this kind of Instagram culture of NPC trends and out of control narcissism. So to say that's not an element of the way it's being represented in those videos, I don't think you can say that either. I feel like there's something else going on there in addition to those things.
Yeah, I mean, and all I would add to that is, for me, and again, it's for me, and I said that, over and over again in the segment too. I mean, it's certainly not for everybody. I know a lot of people who don't have kids and are perfectly happy with that choice, and that's fine. That's great. Like I said, the only reason I think anybody would possibly care what other people think of how they live their lives, or care how other people live their lives, is if they're not happy about their own choices. So to me, as long as you feel all right about your own choices, why would you give a shit about it, about how anybody else chooses to live their life, right? Who cares? But in terms of like having kids and the sacrifice of that, not being able to travel as much, not being able to buy, whatever you want at Costco without thinking what your kid wants from Costco, like that kind of stuff. There is something, despite the difficulty of it, there is something very liberating about it, in the sense that whatever happens to me, or any of my projects, or any of my goals, or any of my ambitions, whatever happens to me, having kids means that as long as I can and must put food on the table for them and take care of them and see to it that they are as happy as they can be, I have a purpose now, no matter what happens. So if, God forbid, knock on wood, obviously, you don't want this to happen. God forbid this project should go belly up. Yeah, I would be very upset about it for a period of time. Would my life be over? Would I be devastated? No, because at the end of the night, I took my kids in, and I know that my job is to take care of them as best I can. So that means that whatever happens to me and however upset I get about it, I still have a purpose, which is them. And that's part of why ultimately I don't really let, trolls and comments get to me too much, because ultimately my wife and kids are the only three people whose opinion of me I wouldn't wipe my ass with at the end of the day, right? So it's liberating in that sense. Like, yes, there is a sense of it that's limiting, but there's an aspect of it that's limiting, but there's an aspect of it that's very freeing as well. That's what makes it scary too. It's scary to care about someone more than yourself, because they're outside of you and there's only so much you can do to protect and control them. Whereas you have at least a, physical sense of control over yourself. But it's also freeing, in the sense that you become not the most important thing in your life. So you feel like whatever happens to you, as long as you have a family, that creates a meaning in and of itself that never goes away. No matter what happens to you, no matter what breaks you get or don't get, or no matter what goes your way or doesn't go your way. If I had to drive delivery 13 hours a day to, take care of my family, I'd do it. I wouldn't like doing it as much as I like doing this, but at the end of the day, as long as I have my family, I have a reason to do it, which means I have a purpose, I have a meaning, I have a reason to go on. It wouldn't be the end of the world.
See, now, and that's what I was addressing in my video. I mean, hey, the stats are against my observation, so I will cede to the stats. My personal experience, maybe that's who I'm around, maybe that's who I attract, maybe that's who I'm attracted to. My personal experience, I don't know anybody who has kids who doesn't have that view. Like what you just articulated, that's what I hear from them. I've asked people with kids, like, hey, man, like, don't you, especially the guys, like, hey, man, you don't ever, like, look to the horizon, No. They're always like, hey, no, that's what gives my life meaning. That's what gives my life purpose. That's what I hear. Now, for me, I am not that type, but I understand why people would value that so highly. And that is my experience of parents, that once they're parents, it changes things for them. It just changes the way they look at things, and that becomes what they value.
Of course, and that's not an easy adjustment to make. That doesn't necessarily happen overnight, right? I mean, it's hard, especially for dads. Like in my experience, it was a little hard because like mothers have this like biological bond with their kids. They grow them, and then when they birth them, they feed them with their own bodies and stuff like that.
Right.
Whereas dads don't have that same biological bond to the kid. And so for me, as someone who, was always lukewarm on babies, it really took until they started growing up a little bit to really bond with them. I mean, I love them. I cared for them, obviously. But now they're like my best buds. Whereas until they could talk a little bit and develop a personality and a sense of humor, it was a little tough. So there is a transition there for sure. And it could be a bit of a mindfuck at times. But as long as you know it's worth it, and it is, I promise to all new dads, it's worth it. You'll get through it, and you'll be much happier and much more fulfilled for it.
Please clap.